Nazi Germany represents honestly one of the darkest chapters in modern history. From 1933 to 1945, Germany was under the control of Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly known as the Nazi Party. This period was defined by totalitarian rule, aggressive expansionism, and the systematic persecution and murder of millions of people. Understanding how this regime came to be, how it maintained its grip on a modern nation, and the terrible consequences of its ideology is essential. It's a story not just of a single evil leader, but of a system that involved many parts, including powerful organizations, pervasive propaganda, and a powerful sense of national identity that was twisted into a weapon against others. To truly comprehend the era, we must look at the different elements that worked together to create and sustain Hitler's dictatorship. This essay will explore four key pillars of the Nazi state. First, we will examine Adolf Hitler himself, the man at the center of it all, and understand his path to becoming the absolute ruler of Germany. Second, we will investigate the Schutzstaffel, or SS, the fearsome paramilitary organization that acted as the regime's enforcers. They were responsible for carrying out some of the most brutal acts of the period. Third, we will analyze the role of propaganda, especially in the form of films, which the Nazis used to control the thoughts and feelings of the German people. Finally, we will discuss the concept of extreme nationalism, a powerful force that the Nazis used to unite many Germans behind their cause. This intense form of patriotism was built on the idea of a superior Aryan race and the need to restore Germany's lost greatness. This narrative required the creation of enemies both inside and outside the country. Minorities, political opponents, and anyone deemed different were targeted, isolated, and ultimately destroyed. By looking at these four interconnected parts, Hitler, the SS, propaganda, and nationalism, we can begin to unmask the dark truths of how Nazi Germany truly operated and the devastating impact it had on the world. This exploration is a difficult but necessary journey into the past. It serves as a powerful reminder of how quickly democratic societies can fall and how dangerous ideologies can take root when people are looking for simple answers to complex problems. The story of Nazi Germany is a warning. It shows what can happen when one person is given too much power, when a state uses fear as its primary tool, when the media is used to spread lies instead of truth, and when love for one's country turns into hatred for others. By studying this period, we learn important lessons about tolerance, human rights, and the importance of standing up against injustice wherever we see it. Adolf Hitler was the central figure of the Nazi regime, a man whose ambition and ideology led to, honestly, unimaginable suffering. Born in Austria in 1889, he was a failed artist and a decorated but unremarkable soldier in World War I. The defeat of Germany in 1918 and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles filled him with a deep sense of bitterness and humiliation. He believed that Germany had been betrayed by its own politicians and by internal enemies, particularly the Jews. This feeling of betrayal became the foundation of his political worldview. After the war, he joined the small German Workers' Party in Munich, which he would soon transform into the Nazi Party, a vehicle for his radical ideas. Hitler's rise from obscurity was fueled by his remarkable talent as a public speaker. He was a charismatic and manipulative orator who could connect with the anger and fears of the German people. In the years following World War I, Germany faced enormous challenges, including economic collapse, hyperinflation, and political instability during the period known as the Weimar Republic. Hitler offered simple, powerful solutions to these complex problems. He promised to restore Germany's national pride, rebuild its economy, and create a strong, unified nation. He skillfully tapped into the public's rage, validating their frustrations and directing their blame towards scapegoats, which made his message dangerously appealing to many. His political strategy was focused on building a messianic cult of personality around himself. He presented himself not just as a politician, but as a savior who had been chosen by fate to lead Germany back to greatness. This image was carefully crafted and promoted through party rallies, symbols like the swastika, and his loyal followers. He attracted a fanatical level of devotion from his supporters, who saw him as the only person capable of solving Germany's problems. This unwavering loyalty was crucial, as it allowed him to demand complete obedience and to push forward with his extremist agenda without facing significant opposition from within his own movement. He was the unquestioned leader, the Führer. A key moment in his early career was the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923, a failed attempt to overthrow the government in Bavaria. Although it failed and he was sent to prison, Hitler used his trial as a platform to spread his ideas to a national audience. While in prison, he wrote his book Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, which laid out his racist ideology and his plans for the future of Germany. The book detailed his belief in the superiority of the Aryan race, his intense anti-Semitism, and his vision for territorial expansion, or Lebensraum. This period, which could have ended his political career, instead helped him become a well-known figure and refine the ideas that would later become the official policy of the Nazi state. Adolf Hitler's journey to becoming the absolute dictator of Germany was, honestly, a calculated process of undermining democracy from within. The Great Depression of 1929 was a turning point. The economic chaos it caused made the Nazi Party's promises of stability and national renewal more attractive than ever before. As unemployment soared and people lost faith in the Weimar government, they turned to extremist parties like the Nazis and the Communists. In the elections of the early 1930s, the Nazi Party gained a significant number of seats in the German parliament, the Reichstag. This growing political power made it impossible for the established conservative politicians to ignore Hitler. In January 1933, in a fateful political miscalculation, conservative leaders convinced President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor. They believed they could control him and use his popular support for their own purposes. They were wrong. Hitler immediately began to dismantle the democratic institutions that stood in his way. Just 1 month after he became Chancellor, a fire destroyed the Reichstag building. Hitler and the Nazis blamed the fire on the Communists and used it as an excuse to declare a state of emergency. This event was a critical step in his consolidation of power, as it allowed him to suspend basic civil liberties. The Reichstag fire decree, passed just 1 day after the fire, eliminated freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to assemble. It gave the government the power to arrest and imprison people without a trial. This decree effectively silenced all political opposition. A few weeks later, Hitler pushed the Reichstag to pass the Enabling Act of 1933. This law gave his government the power to make and enforce laws without the involvement of the parliament or the president. With the Enabling Act, Hitler became a legal dictator. Democracy in Germany was officially dead, and the foundation for a totalitarian state was firmly in place. With these new powers, Hitler moved swiftly to eliminate all remaining sources of opposition. He banned all other political parties, making the Nazi Party the only legal party in Germany. He took control of the courts, making sure that judges would enforce Nazi ideology rather than the rule of law. He abolished labor unions, replacing them with a Nazi-controlled organization. When President Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer und Reichskanzler, or Leader and Reich Chancellor. He was now the undisputed head of state, head of government and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, holding absolute power over the German nation. The Schutzstaffel, better known as the SS, was one of the most powerful and feared organizations in Nazi Germany. Its name translates to Protection Squadron, and it began in the 1920s as a small personal bodyguard unit for Adolf Hitler. Its members were chosen for their unwavering loyalty to the Führer. Under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler, who took command in 1929, the SS was transformed from this small group of guards into a massive and complex paramilitary organization. Himmler envisioned the SS as the new elite of Nazi Germany, a racial aristocracy that would embody the Nazi ideal of the pure Aryan man. He imposed strict racial and physical requirements for entry. The SS grew to have immense power and influence, operating almost as a state within the state. It was responsible for a vast range of duties, from internal security and intelligence gathering to managing the German economy and overseeing the territories conquered during the war. Unlike the regular police or the army, the SS was not bound by the law. It answered only to Hitler, giving him a powerful and ruthless tool to enforce his will without any legal or moral constraints. This direct line of command meant that the SS could carry out any order, no matter how brutal, with complete impunity. Its members were indoctrinated to believe that their loyalty was to Hitler alone. The organization was divided into several branches, each with its own specific functions. The most well-known of these was the Allgemeine SS, or General SS, which was the main branch responsible for enforcing racial policy and general policing duties within Germany. Another key branch was the Waffen-SS, or Armed SS, which was the combat arm of the organization. The Waffen-SS fought alongside the regular German army, but became known for its particular fanaticism and brutality on the battlefield. It was often given the most difficult assignments and was responsible for numerous war crimes. These different branches allowed the SS to extend its control over every aspect of German life in the occupied territories. The SS represented the ultimate expression of Nazi ideology. Its members were taught to be merciless, to suppress all emotion, and to see themselves as the protectors of the German race. They were responsible for identifying and eliminating anyone the regime considered an enemy. This included political opponents, Jews, Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, people with disabilities, and anyone else who did not fit into their narrow vision of a pure society. The black uniform of the SS, with its skull and crossbones insignia, became a symbol of terror and death throughout Germany, and occupied Europe, representing the cold, bureaucratic and systematic nature of Nazi evil. The SS was the primary instrument of terror used by the Nazi regime to control the population and eliminate its enemies. One of its most important functions was running the vast network of concentration and extermination camps. These camps were first established in 1933 to imprison political opponents, such as communists and social democrats. However, their purpose soon expanded. The SS, through its branch known as the SS Totenkopfverbände, or Death's Head units, managed these camps with extreme brutality. Prisoners were subjected to forced labor, starvation, torture, and medical experiments. The camps were designed to dehumanize and destroy anyone the Nazis considered an undesirable. The SS was also at the forefront of implementing the Holocaust, the systematic state-sponsored genocide of 6 million Jews. The SS was tasked with rounding up Jewish people from all over Europe, deporting them to the camps, and murdering them. Special mobile killing squads called the Einsatzgruppen, which were part of the SS, followed the German army into the Soviet Union. Their mission was to shoot Jewish men, women and children in mass executions. Later, the SS oversaw the construction and operation of extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, which were essentially factories of death, complete with gas chambers and crematoria designed for industrial-scale murder. Beyond the camps, the SS controlled the Nazi police state through organizations like the Gestapo, or secret state police, and the Sicherheitsdienst, the intelligence agency of the SS. The Gestapo had the power to arrest, interrogate, and imprison people without any judicial process. They relied on a network of informers and encouraged citizens to report on their neighbors, creating a climate of constant fear and suspicion. No one felt safe from the reach of the Gestapo. And the SD, on the other hand, gathered intelligence on real and perceived enemies of the Nazi Party, both at home and abroad, making sure that no opposition could organize effectively. The persecution carried out by the SS was not limited to Jews and political opponents. The regime targeted many other groups, for example, LGBTQ+ people, particularly gay men and transgender women, were hunted down. Their communities, which had experienced a period of relative openness in the Weimar Republic, were destroyed. The SS used records seized from places like the Institute of Sexology in Berlin to identify and arrest thousands of individuals. They were sent to concentration camps where they were forced to wear a pink triangle and were subjected to particularly cruel treatment. The SS was the fist of the Nazi Party, crushing all forms of dissent and diversity with systematic violence. Propaganda was an essential tool for the Nazi regime, just as important as the terror enforced by the SS. The Nazis understood that to maintain power, they needed to control not just what people did, but also what they thought and believed. This effort was led by Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Public Enlightenment. and propaganda. Goebbels was, a master of manipulation and used every available medium to spread the Nazi message. He centralized control over all forms of communication, including newspapers, magazines, radio, and the arts. Nothing could be published or broadcast without the approval of his ministry, ensuring that the German people only heard one voice, the voice of the Nazi Party. The radio was a particularly powerful new technology that the Nazis exploited to great effect. Goebbels promoted the production and sale of cheap radios called the Volksempfänger, or the People's Receiver, so that nearly every German household could afford one. These radios were designed to have a limited range, making it difficult to listen to foreign broadcasts. This allowed the regime to broadcast Hitler's speeches, Nazi rallies, and propaganda programs directly into people's homes. This constant stream of information shaped public opinion, reinforced Nazi ideology, and created a sense of national unity around the Führer. The radio became a direct line from the Nazi leadership into the minds of the German people. Newspapers and the press were also brought under complete control. Independent journalism was destroyed. The Nazis branded any critical media outlet as the Lügenpresse, or the press of lies, a term used to delegitimize any information that did not align with their official narrative. Editors and journalists who were not loyal to the party were fired, arrested, or forced to flee the country. The news that Germans read every day was carefully curated to glorify Hitler and the achievements of the Nazi state, while demonizing its enemies. Stories constantly reinforced the idea that Germany was facing threats from Jews, communists, and foreign powers, justifying the government's repressive measures as necessary for national survival. The propaganda machine also used powerful symbols and public spectacles to create an emotional bond with the people. The swastika became a ubiquitous symbol of Nazi power, displayed on flags, armbands, and buildings across the country. Massive, highly choreographed rallies like the annual Nuremberg rallies were designed to be overwhelming sensory experiences. With thousands of uniformed participants, dramatic lighting, and passionate speeches, these events were meant to create a feeling of belonging, strength, and collective purpose. They were not just political meetings, they were, honestly, quasi-religious ceremonies designed to foster fanatical loyalty to Hitler and the Nazi cause, making people feel part of something larger than themselves. Among all the tools of propaganda, film held a special place for the Nazi regime. Joseph Goebbels believed that film was one of the most modern and effective instruments for influencing the masses. He thought that propaganda was most effective when it was subtle, when the audience did not even realize they were being manipulated. Therefore, while some Nazi films were overtly political, many were designed as popular entertainment, comedies, dramas, and historical epics that subtly wove Nazi ideology into their stories. The goal was to shape values and attitudes over time, making Nazi ideas seem normal, natural, and desirable to the German public. One category of Nazi film was designed to glorify Hitler and the Nazi Party. The most famous example is Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will, released in 1935. This film documented the 1934 Nuremberg rally and is honestly a masterpiece of propaganda filmmaking. Riefenstahl used innovative camera angles, aerial shots, and moving cameras to portray Hitler as a godlike figure and the Nazi movement as an overwhelmingly powerful and unified force. The film does not have a traditional narrator. Instead, it uses excerpts from speeches and powerful imagery to create an emotional and almost spiritual experience. It was designed to inspire awe and devotion, reinforcing the cult of personality around Hitler. Another, more sinister type of propaganda film was used to dehumanize the enemies of the state, particularly the Jewish people. Films like The Eternal Jew, released in 1940, were made to spread anti-Semitic stereotypes and incite hatred. This film, presented as a documentary, used manipulative editing and false comparisons to portray Jews as a parasitic and corrupting race that was plotting to dominate the world. It compared Jewish people to rats, associating them with filth and disease. By constantly repeating these vile and untrue messages, these films aimed to strip Jews of their humanity in the eyes of the German public, making it easier to justify their persecution and, ultimately, their murder. Even films that were not explicitly about politics or race often carried a propaganda message. Historical dramas were used to promote German nationalism and militarism, celebrating heroic figures from Germany's past and suggesting a historical destiny that the Nazis were now fulfilling. Many films emphasized the Nazi ideal of Volksgemeinschaft, or the people's community, where individuals sacrificed their own desires for the good of the nation. These movies promoted values like duty, obedience, and self-sacrifice. By controlling the stories told on the silver screen, the Nazi regime was able to conduct a powerful and sustained campaign to win the hearts and minds of its citizens. Extreme nationalism was the ideological glue that held the Nazi regime together. This was not just simple patriotism, it was a radical and aggressive ideology based on the concept of race. The Nazis promoted the myth of a pure Aryan German people whom they considered to be a master race. They claimed that this race was superior to all others and was destined to rule. This belief was used to justify their political goals, from conquering other nations to purifying Germany from within. This form of nationalism was exclusive and dangerous, as it defined who belonged to the nation and, more importantly, who did not. It created a powerful US versus them mentality. This extreme nationalism found fertile ground in the Germany of the 1920s and 30s. The nation was still suffering from the humiliation of its defeat in World War I and the punitive Treaty of Versailles. The treaty had forced Germany to accept blame for the war, pay crippling reparations, and give up territory. Many Germans felt that their national pride had been stolen. The economic devastation of the Great Depression added to this sense of crisis. The Nazis skillfully exploited these feelings. They promised to tear up the treaty, restore Germany's military strength, and reclaim its status as a great world power. They offered a vision of a renewed and powerful nation, which was a very appealing message for a population in despair. To build this unified national community, the Nazis needed to identify enemies against whom the German people could unite. They created a long list of scapegoats who were blamed for all of Germany's problems. The primary target was the Jewish population, who were falsely accused of controlling international finance and betraying the country during World War I. But the list of internal enemies was long and included communists, liberals, Roma and Sinti people, people with disabilities, and anyone who did not conform to Nazi social norms. By constantly attacking these groups, the regime was able to direct public anger away from its own failures and create a false sense of unity built on shared hatred. This aggressive nationalism was also the driving force behind Nazi foreign policy. The idea of Lebensraum, or living space, was central to their vision. Hitler believed that the superior German race needed more territory to expand and thrive, particularly in Eastern Europe. This belief directly led to the invasion of Poland in 1939, which started World War II, and the subsequent invasion of the Soviet Union. The war was seen not just as a political conflict, but as a racial struggle to secure the future of the German people. This toxic mix of racial superiority and national ambition led to a devastating war and the genocide of millions who were deemed inferior and in the way of German expansion. The Nazi regime's ideology of racial purity and totalitarian control meant that anyone who was considered different or who opposed the party was seen as a threat that had to be eliminated. The treatment of these groups reveals the true brutality of the system. Political opponents were the first to be targeted. Immediately after Hitler came to power, communists, socialists, trade unionists, and anyone else who dared to speak out against the Nazis were arrested. The first concentration camps like Dachau were built specifically to hold these political prisoners. They were subjected to torture and brutal treatment in order to crush any form of organized resistance to the new regime. The persecution of Jewish people was the most systematic and extreme. It began with discriminatory laws and propaganda and escalated to violence and mass murder. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of their German citizenship and forbade them from marrying or having relationships with Aryan Germans. They were gradually forced out of public life, their businesses were taken away, and their synagogues were burned during the violent pogrom of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, in 1938. This persecution culminated in the final solution, the Nazi plan for the genocide of the Jewish people, which was carried out by the SS in the extermination camps of occupied Poland. Other groups were also targeted for not fitting into the Nazis' narrow worldview. The Roma and Sinti people, who were falsely labelled as racially inferior and asocial, were subjected to a similar process of persecution and genocide. Hundreds of thousands were arrested, deported and murdered. People with physical and mental disabilities were also considered a burden on the German nation and a threat to its supposed racial purity. Under the T4 euthanasia program, tens of thousands of disabled men, women and children were systematically murdered in special killing centers. This was a chilling prelude to the methods that would later be used in the Holocaust. The Nazis also sought to reverse the social progress that had been made during the Weimar Republic. Germany in the 1920s had been a center of research and relative tolerance for LGBTQ+ rights, led by figures like Magnus Hirschfeld. The Nazis saw this as a sign of moral decay. On May 6, 1933, Nazi students stormed Hirschfeld's Institute of Sexology, burning its priceless library and research. The records seized were used to hunt down and persecute thousands of LGBTQ+ individuals. They were arrested, tortured and sent to concentration camps. The systematic destruction of minorities and opponents was not a side effect of the Nazi regime. It was its central purpose, driven by a hateful ideology that worked to eliminate all human diversity.